The little girl grabbed the woman's leg so hard her knuckles turned white, and she looked up at her father, a man worth more money than most people will see in 10 lifetimes, and she said 5 words that brought a 37,000 square foot mansion to absolute silence. But we're not there yet. And if I start at the end, you'll miss the thing that makes this story hurt. So let me take you back. Back to the morning when a woman named Ruth Amara packed a single suitcase, sat on the edge of a bed that wasn't hers, in a room that wasn't hers, in a house that had never been hers, and cried without making a sound. Because Ruth had learned a long time ago how to cry without making a sound. She'd had a lot of practice. Let me tell you about Ruth. Not the version of Ruth that the family saw. Not the version that wore the pressed uniform and kept her hair pinned back and said, "Yes, ma'am," and, "Of course, sir," and moved through the halls of that house like a ghost with good posture. The real Ruth. The one underneath. Ruth Amara was 34 years old. Born in a small town in the Philippines called San Isidro, and if you haven't heard of it, that's fine, most people haven't, which is kind of the point. San Isidro was the kind of place where everyone's grandfather farmed the same land and everyone's mother knew how to stretch a pot of rice to feed 8 people and nobody locked their doors because there was nothing to steal. Ruth was the second of 5 children. Her father drove a tricycle taxi, not the kind you're picturing, the motorized kind with a sidecar that fits 3 passengers if everyone breathes in. Her mother sold fish at the wet market every morning starting at 4 a.m. They were not poor in the way that people in rich countries imagine poverty. They were not miserable. They were not defeated. They were just tight. Everything was tight. The budget was tight. The space was tight. The margin between okay and not okay was so thin you could see through it. Ruth was the smart one. Every family has one. The kid who reads everything, remembers everything, asks questions that make the teachers uncomfortable. Ruth finished high school at the top of her class. She wanted to be a teacher. That was her dream. Not a glamorous dream. Not a dream that would make a movie trailer. Just a woman standing in front of a classroom, helping kids understand the world a little better. But teaching in San Isidro paid $92 a month. 92. And Ruth's younger brother needed surgery on his leg, a congenital issue that had been getting worse since he was 12. The surgery cost $4,000. $4,000 might as well have been $4 million. Her mother's fish stall didn't make that in a year. So Ruth did what millions of women from the Philippines have done for decades. She did the math. And the math said, leave. She applied to an overseas employment agency. Got a placement as a domestic worker. First in Hong Kong, where she worked for a family of 4 for 3 years, sending home 70% of her paycheck every month. Then in Dubai, where she worked for a couple with 2 children for another 2 years. Then in Singapore. Then Kuwait. Each time, she packed the same suitcase. Each time, she raised someone else's children while her own family grew older in photographs she kept in a plastic sleeve inside her Bible. Her brother got his surgery. Her youngest sister finished nursing school. Her parents' roof, which leaked every monsoon, was replaced with concrete. Ruth did all of this from a distance. With money she earned folding other people's laundry, cooking other people's meals, singing other people's children to sleep. She was good at her job. Not just competent, genuinely, deeply good. She had a way with children that couldn't be taught. It wasn't technique. It wasn't training. It was something cellular. Something in the way she listened to them, not the way adults usually listen to children, which is really just waiting for the child to stop talking so the adult can get back to whatever they were doing. Ruth listened like what children said mattered, because she believed it did. She remembered their nightmares. She knew which stuffed animal needed to be in the bed and which one needed to be on the shelf and why the order mattered. She could tell the difference between a tantrum that meant, "I'm angry," and a tantrum that meant, "I'm scared," and a tantrum that meant, "I just need someone to hold me and not let go." She was, by every measure that should matter but rarely does, extraordinary at caring for children. And the market reflected it. By the time Ruth was 32, she was earning more than most domestic workers, not because anyone valued her, but because word of mouth travels. Families talked. Agencies noticed. And eventually, a referral landed her in the office of a placement firm in New York City that specialized in what they called high net worth household staffing, which is a fancy way of saying rich people who need nannies. The firm matched her with the Calloway family. And this is where the story really begins. Victor Calloway. If you follow finance, even casually, even just the headlines, you've probably heard the name. Calloway Capital Management. Founded in 2003. Hedge fund. Assets under management north of $12 billion. Victor was the face of it. 48 years old. Tall. Not handsome, exactly, but assembled in a way that suggested expensive maintenance. Tailored suits, a watch that cost more than Ruth's childhood home, a jawline that looked like it had been negotiated by lawyers. He was sharp. Disciplined. The kind of man who woke at 4:45 every morning, worked out for exactly 50 minutes, ate the same breakfast, egg whites, black coffee, half a grapefruit, and was in his office by 6:30. He ran his life the way he ran his fund, with precision, with control, and with an almost pathological intolerance for anything he couldn't quantify. Victor had been married once. Her name was Claire. They'd been together for 9 years. By all external accounts, it was a good marriage, or at least an efficient one. They hosted the right dinners, attended the right galas, were photographed at the right events. And then Claire got sick. Pancreatic cancer. Diagnosed in March. Gone by September. 6 months. That's all. 6 months between something doesn't feel right and a funeral with 400 people and white lilies and a eulogy that Victor wrote himself but couldn't finish reading because his voice gave out on the 3rd paragraph. Their daughter, Lily, was 4 years old when her mother died. 4. Old enough to know something terrible had happened. Too young to understand what forever meant. She kept asking when Mommy was coming back. Not once. Not twice. Every day. 4 months. When is Mommy coming back? Is Mommy at the doctor? Is Mommy sleeping? Can we call Mommy? Victor handled it the way Victor handled everything, with strategy. He hired a grief counselor for Lily. The best one in Manhattan. $275 an hour. He restructured his schedule to be home by 7 every evening. He read 3 books on childhood bereavement. He created a system. But here's the thing about grief, especially a child's grief, it doesn't respond to systems. It doesn't follow a flowchart. It doesn't care about your strategy or your schedule or your 3 books. Grief is not a problem to be managed. It's a wound that needs time and presence and the kind of patience that Victor Calloway, for all his billions, did not know how to give. Because Victor loved his daughter. Let me be absolutely clear about that. He loved her fiercely, protectively, in a way that was total and real. But Victor's love was architectural. He expressed it by building things around Lily: security, structure, resources, the best of everything. What he couldn't do, what he had never learned to do, was sit on the floor. I mean that literally and figuratively. He couldn't sit on the floor and play Tea Party for 45 minutes. He couldn't lie on the rug and stare at the ceiling and make up stories about clouds that lived inside the house. He couldn't hold Lily when she was crying and just be there. Without fixing. Without solving. Without a next step. He always needed a next step. And Lily needed someone who didn't. That's where Ruth came in. She started on a Monday in October. The Callaways lived in a townhouse on the Upper East Side. 5 stories, limestone facade, the kind of building that doesn't have a price on any website because if you have to ask, you can't afford it. Ruth arrived at 7 a.m. with her suitcase and her Bible and the plastic sleeve of family photographs. The housekeeper, a Jamaican woman named Pauline who had been with the family since before Claire died, showed Ruth to her room. 3rd floor. Small but clean. A bed, a dresser, a window that looked out onto a courtyard. "The child is difficult," Pauline said. "Not unkindly. Just factually. She bites when she's upset. She doesn't sleep through the night. She won't eat anything green. And she's been through 4 nannies in 2 years." Ruth nodded. 4. The first one lasted 5 months. The second, 3. The third didn't make it past 6 weeks. The last one, 10 days. What happened? Pauline looked at Ruth with an expression that was half warning, half sympathy. Lily doesn't let people in. She's smart. Smarter than a 5-year-old has any right to be. She figures out what you want and she withholds it. She'll be sweet when Mr. Calloway is watching and a completely different child when he's not. She's not bad. She's just broken. And she hasn't found anyone worth trusting yet. Ruth absorbed this, filed it away, and then she asked, what was her mother like? Pauline's face changed, softened. Claire was the warm one. She was the one who sat on the floor. Ruth nodded again, like she'd received directions to a place she already knew how to find. She met Lily that afternoon. Victor made the introduction, formal, almost corporate, which Ruth would later learn was just how Victor operated. "Lily, this is Miss Ruth. She's going to be helping take care of you." Lily was sitting on the couch in the living room. Small for her age. Brown hair that fell past her shoulders in the kind of loose curls that adults spend $100 trying to replicate. She was holding a stuffed rabbit, gray, with one ear that flopped forward and one that stood up straight. The rabbit had a name. Ruth didn't know it yet, but she would. Lily looked at Ruth the way a diplomat assesses a new ambassador, measuring, cautious, revealing nothing. "Hi," Lily said. No warmth. No hostility. Just a word. A border checkpoint. Ruth knelt down. Not crouching, kneeling. Both knees on the floor. Getting lower than Lily's eye level. "Hi, Lily. That's a really serious-looking rabbit." Something flickered in Lily's face. Not a smile. Not yet. More like a recognition that this adult had said something unexpected. "His name is Captain," Lily said. "Captain. That's a good name. Is he in charge of things?" "He's in charge of me." "Well, that seems fair. He looks like he knows what he's doing." And Lily, For the first time in Ruth's presence, for the first time in front of a new nanny in 2 years, almost smiled. Almost. Just a twitch at the corner of her mouth. A crack in the wall so small you'd miss it if you weren't paying the kind of attention Ruth was paying. Victor, watching from the doorway, saw it too. And something in his chest loosened. Just a fraction. The first week was war. Let me not romanticize it. Lily tested Ruth the way a demolition crew tests a building. Systematically, looking for weak points, applying pressure in exactly the right places to see what would collapse. She refused to eat breakfast. Ruth sat with her. Didn't force it. Didn't negotiate. Just sat there and ate her own breakfast and talked casually about nothing. About the weather, about a pigeon she'd seen on the windowsill, about a dream she'd had about a fish that could play piano. Lily pretended not to listen. But she ate half a banana. She threw a tantrum at bedtime, not the screaming kind, the silent kind, which is worse. She simply refused to get in bed. Stood in the middle of her room, rigid, arms at her sides, eyes fixed on the wall, vibrating with a fury that had no target and no language. Ruth sat on the floor next to her. Didn't touch her. Didn't talk. Just sat. For 37 minutes. At minute 38, Lily sat down next to her. At minute 42, Lily leaned against her shoulder. At minute 45, Lily was asleep. Ruth carried her to bed. Tucked Captain the Rabbit under her arm. Pulled the blanket up to her chin. And stood in the doorway for a long time, watching this small, furious, grieving girl sleep, thinking about all the children she'd put to bed over the years. Other people's children, always other people's children, and wondering if love was something you could give without limit, even to people you'd only just met. The answer, Ruth already knew, was yes. You could. It cost you something every time. But you could. The weeks passed. And something began to happen that nobody expected, least of all Victor. Lily started changing. Not dramatically. Not overnight. In small increments, the way spring arrives. Not with a single warm day, but with a series of almost imperceptible shifts that you only recognize in retrospect. She started eating breakfast without a standoff. She started sleeping through the night. Not every night, but most. She started laughing. Actual laughing. The kind that comes from the belly and takes the whole face with it. And she started talking. Not just the transactional speech of a child communicating needs. I'm hungry, I want juice, I don't like this, but real talking. She told Ruth about her mother. Not right away. It came in pieces, the way memory works for children, fragmentary, non-linear, more feeling than fact. Mommy's hands were cold. She always had cold hands. But she'd put them on my cheeks and I didn't mind because they smelled like flowers. Mommy sang a song about a moon. I don't remember the words. Can you remember them for me? Daddy doesn't talk about Mommy. I think it makes him sick. Like the kind of sick where your stomach hurts but you can't throw up. Ruth listened to all of it. Every fragment. Every half memory. She didn't correct. She didn't redirect. She didn't do the thing that well-meaning adults so often do, which is to turn a child's grief into a lesson or a reassurance. She didn't say, Mommy's in a better place, or Mommy's watching over you. She just listened. And when Lily was done, Ruth would say something simple. Something true. Something like, she sounds wonderful. Or, that's a really good memory to keep. Or sometimes, just, I'm glad you told me that. And it was enough. It was Somehow, miraculously enough, Victor noticed the changes. He couldn't help it. His daughter, his guarded, grieving, bite-when-upset daughter, was becoming someone he almost recognized. Someone who resembled the Lily from before. The Lily from when Claire was alive. And Victor, being Victor, did what he always did with good results. He attributed them to the system. The grief counselor was working. The structured schedule was working. The resources he'd assembled were working. Ruth was part of the system. An important part. A well-functioning component. And that's how he thought of her. A component. Not a person. A component. He paid her well, $1,400 a week, which was above market rate, which Victor knew because he'd researched it the way he researched everything. He provided health insurance. He gave her 1 day off per week, Sundays, which Ruth spent at a Catholic church in Astoria where the Mass was in Tagalog, and the priest reminded her of her uncle, and she could close her eyes and almost feel like she was home. She sent money back to San Isidro every month. Her father's tricycle taxi had been replaced with a newer one. Her youngest sister was now working as a nurse in Manila. Her brother's leg had healed. Ruth was, by any external metric, doing well. Better than well. She had a stable position with a wealthy family. She had a clean room and decent pay and a child who had, against all odds and all precedent, decided to trust her. And Ruth loved Lily. Let me just say that plainly because the rest of this story depends on you believing it. Ruth loved that child. Not as an assignment. Not as a job function. Not as a component loving a system. Ruth loved Lily the way you love someone whose pain you've held in your hands. The way you love someone who fell asleep against your shoulder after 38 minutes of silent fury. The way you love someone who asked you to remember the words to a song their dead mother sang. Ruth loved Lily. And Lily loved Ruth. And that love, invisible on every spreadsheet, unmeasurable by any metric Victor Calloway had ever used to evaluate anything, that love was the actual infrastructure holding this household together. Not the grief counselor. Not the schedule. Not the resources. Ruth. But here's the thing about invisible infrastructure. When it works perfectly, people forget it exists. And when people forget it exists, they start believing that the structure would stand just fine without it. 2 years passed. 2 years of Ruth waking at 6, making breakfast, walking Lily to school, picking her up, helping with homework, reading stories, negotiating vegetables, managing playdates, absorbing tantrums, celebrating small victories, holding the line during bad days, and sitting on the floor. Always sitting on the floor, always getting low, always meeting Lily where Lily was. 2 years. 730 days. Roughly 17,000 hours. And in that time, Lily transformed. She was 7 now. Reading above grade level. Social. Had 2 best friends. Could ride a bike. Had stopped asking when Mommy was coming back, not because she'd forgotten, but because she'd found a way to carry that absence without it crushing her. She'd found that way because Ruth helped her find it. And then Victoria Ashton happened. Victoria Ashton. Even saying the name feels like a temperature change. Victoria was 41. Blonde. The kind of blonde that requires a standing appointment every 3 weeks at a salon that doesn't list its prices. She was a socialite, or had been. She'd grown up wealthy, married wealthier, divorced even wealthier, and now occupied a very specific niche in Manhattan's social ecosystem. The beautiful, available, well-connected woman who showed up at charity galas and knew everyone worth knowing and made everything she touched look effortless. She met Victor at a fundraiser in May. By July, they were dating. By September, she was spending weekends at the townhouse. Victor was careful about it. He introduced Victoria to Lily slowly, in controlled increments, with the same strategic planning he applied to everything. A brunch here. An afternoon there. Nothing overnight. Nothing too fast. But Victoria was not a patient woman. Patience was not how she'd gotten where she was. Victoria operated on momentum, on charm, on the ability to enter a room and rearrange its social gravity around herself. She was not unkind. I want to say that. She was not a cartoon villain. She was simply a woman who had spent her entire adult life in environments where the primary currency was image, and she had become very, very fluent in that currency. And the image she wanted, the image she was building, was of herself as the perfect partner for Victor Calloway. Smart, beautiful, good with his daughter. The complete package. And Ruth. Ruth was a complication in that image. Not because Ruth did anything wrong. Ruth was a complication because Ruth was important. Important to the household. Important to Lily. Important in a way that Victoria couldn't quantify but could feel. The way you can feel someone else's gravity even when they're standing quietly in the corner of a room. Victoria felt Ruth's gravity. And it bothered her. It bothered her that Lily reached for Ruth's hand, not Victoria's, when they crossed the street. It bothered her that Lily told Ruth about her day at school, the real version, with the details and the feelings, and gave Victoria the polished summary. It bothered her that when Lily had a nightmare, she called for Ruth. Not Daddy. Not Victoria. Ruth. And Victoria, who was very good at reading power dynamics, understood something that Victor did not. As long as Ruth was in this house, Victoria would always be the secondary female presence in Lily's life. She would always be the understudy, the one who came after. And Victoria Ashton did not do after. She began small, the way these things always begin. A comment here. A suggestion there. Seeds planted so carefully that if you weren't watching for them, you'd think they were just part of the landscape. Don't you think Lily's a little old for a nanny? My friend's children have au pairs, or they just have the housekeeper handle the pickup. I read an article about attachment issues with long-term nannies. Children can become overly dependent. It might actually be healthier for Lily too. I just think it's strange that she goes to Ruth first. For everything. Shouldn't she be coming to you? You're her father. Each comment was reasonable on its surface. Each one appealed to something Victor already worried about. Was Lily too dependent on Ruth? Was he outsourcing too much of his parenting? Was the arrangement, now 2 years deep, becoming something that would be harder to end the longer it went on? Victoria didn't push. She didn't demand. She just kept planting. And Victor, who was brilliant with numbers and blind with people, didn't see the garden growing. He saw only the individual seeds, and each one seemed reasonable. Meanwhile, Ruth felt it. Of course she did. Ruth, who could decode a 5-year-old silence, could certainly decode a grown woman's strategy. She felt the shift in how Victor spoke to her, slightly more formal, slightly more distant. She noticed that her schedule was being adjusted without discussion. Pickups moved, bedtimes changed, responsibilities quietly reallocated. She saw Victoria beginning to insert herself into spaces that had been Ruth's, sitting in on bedtime stories, taking Lily to the park on Ruth's usual day, rearranging the playroom in ways that erased Ruth's organizational system without asking. And Ruth said nothing. Because Ruth understood her position. She understood it with a clarity born from 12 years of working in other people's homes. She was the help. She was the component. Her presence was conditional on someone else's approval, and that approval could be withdrawn at any time, for any reason, or for no reason at all. She had no contract that couldn't be terminated. She had no power that wasn't borrowed. She had no rights in this house that extended beyond the generosity of the man who owned it. And that man was falling in love with someone who wanted her gone. It happened on a Thursday evening in November, almost exactly 2 years to the day after Ruth had arrived. Victor came home at 6:45, earlier than usual. He wasn't wearing his office face. He was wearing a different face, the one he used when he'd made a decision and was preparing to implement it. He asked Ruth to sit in the study. The study was where Victor had serious conversations. It had a desk the size of a small car and bookshelves lined with volumes he'd actually read, which distinguished him from most people with libraries. Ruth sat in the leather chair across from his desk. The same chair where she'd sat 2 years ago when she was hired. She already knew. Before he said a word. She already knew. "Ruth," Victor began. And then he paused. Because to his credit, to the credit of whatever small part of his humanity hadn't been completely colonized by strategy and control, it was hard. It was harder than he expected. "We've decided to make some changes to the household structure." "We." "Not I." "We." Which told Ruth that "we" meant Victoria had helped write this conversation. Lily is getting older. She's doing well in school, she's adjusted socially, and we feel, that she's reached a point where a full-time nanny is no longer necessary. Ruth sat very still. The way she sat still when Lily threw her silent tantrums. Absorbing. Holding. Not breaking. "I want you to know that your work has been exceptional. Lily's progress is remarkable. And I attribute a great deal of that to you." There it was. Attribute. Like Ruth was a footnote in a research paper. A variable in a study. A contributing factor in a child's recovery from the worst thing that ever happened to her. "I've prepared a severance package that I think is very generous. 3 months' pay, plus a bonus, plus a letter of recommendation that should help you secure another position quickly." He slid an envelope across the desk. Ruth looked at it. Didn't touch it. "May I ask why?" she said. Her voice was steady. "I just explained. You explained that Lily is doing well." "That's true. She is doing well. But that doesn't explain why you're removing the person who helped her get there. That's not a reason. That's a result." Victor's jaw tightened. He didn't like being challenged. Especially not by employees. Especially not by employees who were supposed to accept generous severance packages and graceful exits. "Ruth, this isn't a negotiation. The decision has been made." "Whose decision?" "Mine." "Yours." "Not Victoria's." The name landed in the room like a stone in still water. Victor's face didn't change. But his eyes did. Just for a fraction of a second. The flicker of a man who's been seen through and doesn't enjoy the experience. "Victoria has nothing to do with this." "Victor." She said his name. Not Mr. Calloway. His name. And it was the first time in 2 years she'd done it. "I have spent 730 days in this house. I have held your daughter while she cried for her mother. I have slept on her floor when the nightmares were so bad she couldn't be alone. I have taught her how to tie her shoes and how to read a clock and how to say, "I'm sad," instead of biting. I am not asking you to keep me because I need the job. I'm asking you to think about what this will do to her. Victor stood up, which, in the language of power, meant the conversation was over. I've thought about it carefully. Children are resilient. She'll adjust. And she'll still have Pauline, and she'll have me, and she'll have... He stopped. Didn't say Victoria's name. Knew better. The transition will be at the end of the month. That gives you 2 weeks. 2 weeks. 2 weeks to say goodbye to a child who had already lost one mother and was about to lose the closest thing she had to another. Ruth stood. She picked up the envelope. Not because she accepted it. Because leaving it on the desk felt like leaving a piece of her dignity behind, and she had so little of that left to spare. She walked out of the study, down the hall, up the stairs, past Lily's door, which was slightly open. She could hear Lily inside, talking to Captain the Rabbit in a low, serious voice, having the kind of conversation that children have with stuffed animals, the kind where the animal understands everything and judges nothing. Ruth walked past, went to her room, sat on the edge of the bed, and cried, without making a sound. She didn't tell Lily. Not right away. She couldn't. How do you tell a 7-year-old that you're leaving? How do you explain institutional decisions to someone who still believes that love is a permanent address? Ruth spent the first week of those 2 weeks doing what she always did. She made breakfast. She walked Lily to school. She picked her up. She helped with homework. She read stories. She sat on the floor. She was present. Fully, completely, desperately present. And if Lily noticed something different, a lingering hug that lasted 1 beat too long, a look across the dinner table that held something heavy, she didn't say anything. She was 7. 7-year-olds feel everything but can't name half of it. On the morning of the last day, Ruth packed her suitcase. Same suitcase she'd brought. Same suitcase she'd carried through Hong Kong, Dubai, Singapore, Kuwait. A suitcase that had been unpacked and repacked so many times that the zipper sometimes stuck, and Ruth had to work it gently, persuading it the way you persuade anything that's been asked to do the same thing too many times. She placed her things inside. Her Bible. Her photographs. The small collection of drawings Lily had made for her over 2 years. A crayon sun, a stick figure Ruth with brown skin and a smile that took up half the face. A picture of Captain the Rabbit that Lily had worked on for an entire afternoon, getting the floppy ear just right. Ruth folded each drawing carefully, placed them between the pages of her Bible like pressed flowers. And then she went downstairs for the last time. Victor had arranged for the farewell to happen in the living room. He'd told Lily that morning, in what he described to Ruth as a calm, age-appropriate conversation, that Miss Ruth was going to be leaving to help another family, and that they were very grateful for everything she'd done. Lily had taken the news in silence, which Victor interpreted as acceptance. Because Victor still, after 2 years, after 730 days, did not understand the difference between a child being silent because she's okay and a child being silent because she's falling apart so completely that sound hasn't caught up yet. Ruth walked into the living room. Victor was standing by the window. Victoria was there too, which Ruth had not expected and which felt, in a way she couldn't articulate, like the final insult. Victoria was wearing a cream sweater and a smile that was calibrated to look supportive but was, underneath the calibration, the smile of someone who had won. Pauline was in the doorway to the kitchen. Her eyes were red. She'd been crying. She didn't bother hiding it. And Lily was on the couch, sitting exactly where she'd been sitting the first time Ruth met her. Same couch, same posture, holding Captain. Ruth walked over, knelt down, both knees on the floor, getting lower than Lily's eye level, just like the first time. "Hey, sweetheart." Lily looked at her, and her eyes, God, her eyes. The eyes of a child who has been here before, who has been in this exact place before, who has stood on this exact cliff and already knows what the fall feels like. "You're leaving," Lily said. Not a question. "Yes, baby. I am. Because Daddy said so." Ruth hesitated, chose carefully. Because sometimes things change, and grown-ups make decisions that are hard to understand. Because Victoria told Daddy to make you leave. The room went cold. Victor stiffened. Victoria's calibrated smile cracked. Just a hairline, just a fissure, but enough. "Lily," Victor started. "It's true," Lily said. Her voice was flat. Matter of fact. A 7-year-old stating a fact with the certainty of someone who's been listening to every conversation she wasn't supposed to hear. "I heard you. Both of you. In the study. Last Tuesday. You said Ruth was an obstacle to the new family dynamic." Those were Victoria's words. "And you agreed." Silence. The kind of silence that has weight. That presses down on everyone in the room equally. Victor's face was white. Victoria's was red. Pauline had turned away completely, facing the kitchen, her shoulders shaking. Ruth said nothing. She just looked at Lily. And Lily looked back. And the conversation between them, the real conversation, the one that had nothing to do with words, was happening in that look. It was saying, "I know. I know. I've always known." And then Lily stood up from the couch. She walked, not ran, walked, with a deliberateness that was far too old for her body, across the living room to where Ruth was kneeling. And she grabbed Ruth's leg. Both arms wrapped around Ruth's thigh, her small fingers gripping the fabric of Ruth's pants, her face pressed into Ruth's hip, and she held on with a force that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than muscle. Victor stepped forward. "Lily, sweetheart, come on. Let Miss Ruth." "No." The word detonated in the room. Not a tantrum. Not a scream. A declaration. Lily looked up. At her father. At this man she loved. This man who loved her. This man who had given her everything except the one thing she needed most. And she said, "She is my family." 5 words. 5 words that landed like a verdict. Like a judgment rendered by the only judge in the room whose authority could not be appealed. "She is my family. Not she is my nanny. Not she is nice. Not I'll miss her. She is my family." Victor Calloway, a man who managed $12 billion, who moved markets with phone calls, who had built an empire out of analysis and control and the absolute certainty that he could see the board more clearly than anyone else in the room, Victor Calloway stood in his own living room and realized, with a shock so total that it restructured his understanding of the last 2 years, that he couldn't see the board at all. He had looked at Ruth and seen a line item, a salary, a function, a role that could be filled by anyone with the right qualifications and the right references. He had looked at his daughter and seen a problem being managed, therapist here, nanny there, schedule adjusted, outcome tracked. He had looked at Victoria and seen the next logical phase, the new partner, the new structure, the completed picture. And he had missed, completely, catastrophically missed, the one thing that was actually holding everything together. The woman on the floor. The woman who knelt. The woman who sat through 38-minute tantrums without speaking. The woman who remembered which ear on the rabbit flopped forward. The woman who his daughter, his grieving, brilliant, broken and rebuilt daughter, called family. Victor looked at Lily. Then at Ruth. Then at the suitcase by the door. And in his eyes, something crumbled. Not his composure. His certainty. His unshakable, billion-dollar certainty that he could see the world clearly. It crumbled. And in the rubble, for the first time in maybe years, maybe since Claire, maybe since before Claire, Victor saw something he hadn't been looking for. He saw the truth. He saw that his daughter's recovery was not a system output. It was a love story. A love story between a 7-year-old girl and a woman from San Isidro who earned $1,400 a week to do something she would have done for free. And he had almost thrown it away. For a woman in a cream sweater who called a human being an obstacle. "Lily," Victor said. And his voice broke. For only the second time in his adult life. The first was at Claire's funeral. "Lily, I'm sorry." Lily didn't let go of Ruth's leg. "Tell her she can stay." "Lily, tell her." Victor turned to Ruth. And the thing that passed between them in that look was not a negotiation. It was not an employment discussion. It was one adult recognizing another adult's worth for the first time. Truly recognizing it. The way you recognize a load-bearing wall only when the building starts to lean. "Ruth," Victor said, "I was wrong. And I am asking you, not telling you, asking you, please stay." Ruth looked at him. At this man who had held her livelihood in one hand and her heart in the other and hadn't even known which was which. And she wanted to say no. A part of her, the part that had packed and unpacked that suitcase across 4 countries, the part that had built a carapace of professionalism to protect the soft thing underneath, that part wanted to walk out the door and never come back. But then she felt Lily's arms around her leg. Felt the fierce, desperate grip of a child who had already learned, at 7, that love leaves. That the people you need most are the people most likely to disappear. And Ruth knew. The way she always knew. The way she knew that a banana would work when negotiation wouldn't. The way she knew that 38 minutes of silence was the correct prescription for a rage that had no words. She knew that walking away from this child to protect her own pride would be just another adult choosing themselves over a kid who needed them. And Ruth had never done that. Not in Hong Kong. Not in Dubai. Not in Kuwait. She had never, not once, chosen herself over a child who needed her. She put her hand on Lily's head. Felt the soft curls under her fingers. "I'll stay," she said. Lily sobbed. The real kind. The loud kind. The kind she hadn't made since those early days, those first terrible weeks after Claire, when the grief was so big it needed the whole body to express it. But this wasn't grief. This was relief. The relief of a child who pulled at the rope and felt it hold. Victoria Ashton stood in the corner of the room. Her cream sweater. Her calculated smile, now gone. Her strategy, now visible to everyone, including the man she'd been executing it on. She looked at Victor. Victor did not look back. "I think," Victor said, still looking at Ruth, still looking at his daughter, "I think you should go, Victoria." Victoria opened her mouth. closed it, opened it again. "Victor, you can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. I'll have someone send your things." Victoria Ashton left the Callaway townhouse at 11:14 that morning. She did not come back. And I could end the story here. A lot of people would. The confrontation. The reversal. The villain vanquished, the hero restored, the child clinging to the woman she loves. Roll credits. But the real story, the one I actually need you to hear, is what happened after. Because the twist isn't the moment in the living room. That's just the explosion. The twist is what grew in the crater. Over the months that followed, Victor Callaway changed. Not in the dramatic, cinematic way where a man has an epiphany and becomes a different person overnight. In the slow, awkward, stumbling way that real change actually happens. He started sitting on the floor. Literally. He would come home and instead of going to his study, he'd sit on the rug in Lily's room and ask her to teach him whatever she'd learned at school that day. And he was bad at it. He sat stiffly. His knees hurt. He didn't know how to play without an objective. He kept trying to turn Lily's games into learning opportunities, and Lily would roll her eyes and say, "Daddy, it's not homework. Just play." And he'd try, and fail, and try again. He started talking to Ruth. Not as an employer to an employee. As a person to a person. He asked about her family. About San Isidro. About her dream of being a teacher. And when he learned, really learned, not just scanned the data, that this woman had given up her own ambitions to raise other people's children for 12 years so her family could survive, something rearranged itself in his understanding of the world. His wealth, his fund, his $12 billion in assets under management. All of it suddenly looked different when held up against a woman who'd sent 70% of a modest paycheck home every month and called it love. He asked Ruth one evening, while Lily was in bed, what she would do if she could do anything. Ruth thought about it. "I'd open a school," she said. "Back home. A real one. With books and computers and a teacher who stays because the salary is enough to live on." "How much would that cost?" Ruth laughed. The kind of laugh you give when someone asks you to price a dream. "More than I'll ever have. Humor me. Maybe $150,000 to build it, and then maybe $40,000 a year to run it." Victor went quiet. Did the math in his head. The same way he always did. But this time, the math led somewhere different. 6 months later, the Callaway Foundation announced a grant for the construction of an elementary school in San Isidro, Philippines. The total investment was $210,000, $150 for construction, $60 for the first 18 months of operation. The school was named Serafina Amara Elementary, after Ruth's mother. Ruth flew home for the opening. Lily went with her. Victor bought 3 plane tickets, business class, which Ruth protested and Lily thought was amazing, and they flew to Manila and then drove 4 hours to San Isidro and stood in the courtyard of a brand new school with 32 students and 2 teachers and a small library with actual books on actual shelves. And Ruth's mother, Serafina, 71, small, with hands that smelled like fish and lemongrass, stood in the courtyard of a school that bore her name and wept. And Lily, 7 years old, holding Captain the Rabbit, standing in a country she'd never been to, surrounded by children she'd never met. Lily looked at Ruth and said, "This is what you were going to be. A teacher." "It's what I wanted to be," Ruth said. "Then you should be it. You could teach here. But then who would take care of you?" Lily thought about that. with the absolute seriousness that only a 7-year-old can bring to a question. And then she said, "You already taught me the important stuff. The rest is just homework." Ruth laughed and cried at the same time, the way you do when something is too big for just one response. But here's the part that breaks the pattern. Here's the thing I actually came to tell you. Ruth didn't take the teaching job. Not then. She went back to New York with Victor and Lily. She stayed for 3 more years. She stayed until Lily was 10. Until Lily was strong enough and old enough and rooted enough that leaving wouldn't be an uprooting, it would be a graduation. And when Ruth finally did leave, when she finally packed that suitcase one last time and zipped it shut with a zipper that still stuck, it wasn't a firing. It wasn't a severance package. It was a goodbye. A real one. The kind that costs everything and is worth more. Lily cried. Victor cried. Pauline cried so hard she had to sit down. And Ruth knelt one last time, both knees on the floor, lower than Lily's eye level. "You're going to be fine," Ruth said. "I know," Lily said, "because you taught me how to be fine." Ruth flew to San Isidro. She started teaching. 3rd grade. 28 students. A classroom with windows that let in too much sun and not enough breeze. A salary of $300 a month, supplemented by the Callaway Foundation. She was finally, at 39 years old, the woman she'd always wanted to be. And every Sunday, without fail, she received a video call from a girl in New York City who told her about school, about friends, about a rabbit named Captain whose ear still flopped forward, about a father who was learning, slowly, badly, beautifully, how to sit on the floor. So here's the lesson. And it's not the one you think. The lesson isn't, don't fire the nanny because she might be important. The lesson isn't about rich people learning to value poor people, though that's part of it. The lesson is about who we count as family and who we don't. We live in a world that treats family like a legal document, like a bloodline, like a last name. Family is the people you're born to. Family is the people who share your DNA. Family is the people on the Christmas card. But Lily Callaway, a child who had lost her mother, been failed by her father, and nearly had her heart ripped out by a woman in a cream sweater, Lily knew something that most adults have forgotten. Family is not a document. Family is not DNA. Family is the person who sits on the floor with you for 38 minutes and doesn't say a word. Family is the person who remembers which ear on the rabbit flops forward. Family is the person who holds your grief without trying to fix it. Family is the person who gets on their knees, literally, physically, on their knees, so they can see the world from your height. Victor Callaway spent his whole life looking down. At spreadsheets. At markets. At employees. At a woman from the Philippines who cleaned up after his tragedy and asked for nothing but the chance to love his daughter. And it took a 7-year-old, gripping a woman's leg with white-knuckle certainty, to teach him the only thing his $12 billion could never buy. She is my family. 5 words. The most expensive education a billionaire ever received. And it came from the cheapest seat in the room, a child on a couch, holding a rabbit with a floppy ear, telling the truth because nobody had taught her yet that the truth is something adults are afraid of. So the next time someone takes care of your child, your parent, your home, the next time someone folds your laundry or cooks your dinner or sits with your mother so you can sleep, look at them. Really look at them. Not at the uniform. Not at the salary. Not at the role. Look at them. Because the distance between employee and family isn't measured in paychecks or contracts or job descriptions. It's measured in presence, in showing up, in kneeling down, in staying. And sometimes, the person you're about to let go is the person who was holding everything together. And you won't know it, you won't feel it, you won't see it, you won't understand it, until a 7-year-old grabs a leg and says 5 words that make a 37,000 square foot house feel, for the first time, like a home.